Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast. I have such an exciting guest for you today, Trivelle Simpson. Welcome, Trivelle.
Thank you for having me.
So, Trivelle is the president and founder of the Drive Group, which started as a trading think tank and now operates as a venture investment fund. So, tonight, what we're going to focus on is the business critical issue of cash flow and how trends and analysis can help predict and resolve cash flow problems, which is always a big and important issue for businesses, right, Trivelle?
Massive, massive, huge.
Yeah. But before we get into it, let's just talk a little bit about you. So you're in Canada, aren't you?
I am. Yes, it's not cold. I know everybody thinks Canada's cold. We're in our summer now. It's beautiful.
Okay, fantastic. So, Trivelle, how did you come to be the CEO and the founder of this really exciting business? Tell us about your journey.
So I started out, I actually wanted to be a campaign manager or a lawyer when I left high school. So I went to school, I was studying politics and economics. My second year in college and university, I really just fell in love with politics, the sort of the party system, the nature of making things work for people. So I thought I was going to be a campaign manager. So I kept volunteering for different political campaigns. And at the same time, I had taken a job working at a company called Davis and Henderson. They did check processing for a bank here called Scotia Bank. So while I'm at Davis and Henderson, I'm getting ready to graduate. I finally graduate from school. I volunteer on my first campaign. I'm relatively certain I've picked a great candidate, and they lose. They lose badly. I go. Unfortunately, my political dreams are dashed because you can't manage a campaign if you can't win. And the goal then became to just double down on what I knew, which was my finance and risk mitigation career. So stayed there at Davis and Henderson, went over to RBC, which is a bank here in Canada, Royal Bank of Canada. Spent some time at Manulife, just again, risk mitigation, understanding balance sheet numbers, business, sort of the social climate of the traditional Canadian or global investor. And then that all sort of leads to a New Year's Eve party where I see a young man that I'd known, and it's the traditional story. He's buying champagne, the ladies love him, the men want to
Oh,
be in.
yeah.
And I asked him, what do you do? And he says he managed his money in the markets. And I said, okay, give me your number. I'll give you a call. Gave him a call that week. Understood he was talking about derivatives trading, which is sort of fractional speculative market movements. And
Mhm.
I just, I just got addicted. Read every free online course I could find, went into every forum that I could find myself into just to try and learn how do you move money in the markets.
Mhm.
And then I waited for what was my tax return that year. So this is around 2004. So I'm 23
Mhm.
at the time. I've just aged myself, but 23 at the time. And my tax return was $1,500. And I'd finished work that day, and I telling everybody I'm gonna trade. And I knew that the what they call the Asian session starts at around 6 p.m. So I'm done all my homework. I'm ready to do my first trade. 9 o'clock p.m. hits Eastern Standard for my time, and by 1 o'clock that morning, so 5 hours, I doubled my money. I'd made another $1,500,
Wow.
and after that, I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked.
Oh, I can understand that. I mean, that is just incredible. So, Trivelle, for people who are not traders and they're not financial experts, can you
Sure.
explain derivatives in a really simple way?
I can. Okay, perfect. This is
Okay.
amazing. So let's say that you are a stock. You're Jane, and right now, Jane, you're worth $10. It's a great price. It's a lovely price. But we think that before the end of the night, you're going to be worth more. We don't know how much. We just think things are looking good. You're going to be worth more. So
Okay.
I'll go to a bank and I'll say, hey, can you lend me money? I'm betting that Jane is going to be worth more money. And if I'm right, I want you to owe me the return. The bank will say, we'll give you a derivative. We'll let you bet on that speculative value on Jane's value. Now, here's the thing. If you're wrong, you owe us the money. And I'll say, fine, you got a deal. So every dollar that she goes up in value, you'll give me $1 million. Every dollar she goes down in value, I'll give you $1 million. And that is
Mm.
derivatives trading. It's a speculative uh, sort of placement on your assumption of what price will do. So in that moment, Jane, if you go up $5 that night, I'll make $5 million. I'll close out and I'll go to the bank. The beautiful thing about it is that liquidity providers and banks are who settle your orders. So you can be a lot
Mhm.
faster. It's not like options trading. You're not waiting. There's no limit to what you can make. And then you could essentially only lose what you have, right? So, because when I go and stake the bet with that bank, I'm staking my account value. So you don't owe on derivatives trading. The most you can hit on it is zero, at least with your provider, depending on the one you're with. So that's derivatives trading in a nutshell. You're buying and selling the value of Jane.
Amazing. Well, that is a fantastic explanation. I thank you for that, Trivelle.
You're welcome.
And yeah, I'm sure that there's a lot of skill that goes into predicting those movements,
Mhm.
let's say. And of course, this is brings us back to the thing that we are going to talk about is about how trends and analysis can predict markets, can predict cash flow, all of those juicy topics. So trends and analysis, let's get on to this. Okay, so what is the impact of understanding trends and analysis? And if you are doing something like derivatives trading or
Mhm.
just looking at markets in general, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to understand what's happening
Mhm.
in your market,
Mhm.
how can you use trends and analysis to make better decisions?
So I look at trading the same way I look at business. So this is
Mhm,
why I think that they go together. What you want to know about anybody, any market, any company, is what happens when they're put under a certain amount of pressure.
mhm,
It's all about knowing pain points. So an individual can be random and surprise you, but groupthink is usually the same, and
mhm,
pain points have their reference. The reason why trends and analysis are important is because there's always a history of what will people do if there's this much pressure, and what will people do if
mhm,
there's this much pain. That's the game of both business and trading. So for example, when people are in a situation where interest rates are very, very low, it encourages them to borrow money because it's cheaper to do so, and they
mhm,
stimulate the economy because on a whole, people will say it's cheaper now to play the game than it is later. Then when interest rates are very, very high and it's very, very expensive to borrow money, people have a perspective to save, to pull back. And then that's going to have an impact on your business and the economy because prices are going to need to adjust to the fact that whereas before 10 people were willing to make purchases, now maybe there's only five. And what is the price that we got to get to stimulate those five people to make purchases and see value? There's a lot of other factors. Obviously, politics plays a role, but at its core concept, what you're understanding is how do people respond when things are great and how do people respond when things are tight?
yeah, and I totally get the analogy between the 2 because it really is. If we are out of touch with our market and with the market, then we are in a weak position, right? So this is very, very important, I think, what you're saying.
Absolutely. I tell my parents all the time because they don't really understand the financial markets. We'll watch the news and, you'll hear debt ceiling, you'll hear interest rate, you'll hear inflation. And I tell them all, if you want to understand the health of your economy, just go grocery shopping because the price of produce is an immediate thermometer of what's going on because the farmer will tell you. The farmer will tell you how hard it was to get the chicken to hatch that egg, how hard it was to sell it to this grocer. So when you see eggs going up, oranges going up, natural produce, things that have an expiry date, you're getting an immediate thermometer on the economy because you're seeing how prices having to move in real time week over week.
Well, that's a very interesting topic because certainly over here, prices of food have gone up exponentially. We
Mhm,
have incredible food inflation. So, what
mhm.
is going on, Travell?
So there's a couple different concepts on food inflation, right? Uh, for the most part, I am of the belief that it's overstimulated greed. Okay, in scarcity, so when there's not a lot of something, if I'll put it to you this way, I'm a farmer. I have 10 loaves of bread. I can sell each loaf of bread for $1. So I'm expecting from my bread, I'm supposed to make $10.
Mhm.
If there's a shortage of flour and I could only make 5 loaves of bread, but I still want $10, Now I got to sell each loaf for $2.
Mhm.
If there's a bigger flour shortage and there's only one loaf of bread, which is kind of where we get to, they will sell that loaf for $10 because $10 is the target. The difficult thing that happens is while that's occurring, interest and inflation are all being adjusted and fluctuated to try
Yeah.
and correct that issue because the
Mhm.
goal is to have 10 loaves of bread. The problem is that to correct that issue, and while it's being corrected, you'll get to a point where the baker now will have their 10 loaves of bread, but maybe they'll want to capture some extra profit. So they'll leave the price at $10 a loaf. And then eventually they'll slowly bring it down. But the problem is that the economy isn't a snap of a finger. So instead of it going from 10 to 1, you'll see this slow pull down. So what you're seeing now, we're seeing it here as well. It is the response of poor economics previously.
Okay.
It's the fallout of what happened before, and now it's being corrected. During a time of coming out of COVID, there was an
Mhm.
overstimulation of cash into the marketplace. People
Yep.
had more money than they were accustomed to having, and the producers capitalized on that by raising prices. And that's the issue. So the price raise occurred when people had extra cash. Now we're correcting the flow of extra cash, and the prices are just not coming down as fast to meet that reality. So while the money is running out faster, then the price reductions are coming in.
Well, that's really, really interesting perspective. And I guess in a way, you probably have a very unique perspective because of your interest in politics as well.
Yeah.
So you're interested in politics, you have experience in politics, like really at the sharp end.
Yep.
You've also got this financial background, so the trading and all the rest of it. And now, obviously, you also do consulting, don't you? So you help businesses actually understand those market trends and make sensible decisions about how they run their businesses and how they manage their cash flow and all of that
Absolutely.
as well. So let's just
Absolutely.
talk about that, Trivelle. So give us an example. If a business calls you in and they say, Trivelle, we need your help, what sort of problem might they have?
So I'll give a real life example. We're consulting for a management. It's a technology company. They work
Mhm.
with an alternative technology. We're in a situation right now where a lot of white collar labor, a lot of tech labor is being laid off because it's harder to scale technology that requires investment because it doesn't necessarily always drive revenue.
Mhm.
So then they come
True.
to us and they say, look, we want to maintain our business, we want to maintain our footprint, but the cost of operations are going to get too high because we're paying all these high level executives who are an integral part of our business, high wages, high salaries. What do we do? The tough thing, the tough reality, they always say to cut your workforce. That's not always the answer. Unfortunately, though, right now it would be. And the reason is because all the big companies are making mass layoffs. Amazon is making layoffs, Google is making layoffs, Apple's making layoffs. What does that tell you? That tells you that some of the smartest, most intelligent people taught by some of the largest companies are available and they're cheap because they need work.
Mhm.
So the sad truth is for a company like that that's trying to survive and thrive, you need to rejig your workforce and get some of those people from Google, get some of those people from Apple through your doors at this lower discount because they'll benefit your business long term. It'll help put your balance sheet right. They'll come with new innovative ideas from these larger competitors at a rate cheaper than the existing workforce that you have now that might have ideas that are a bit more stagnant and not ready to adjust with the time. Another concept is just human psychology. The work habit of a person freshly let go from work is 3 times stronger than that of somebody who's been in a job for longer than 2 years. It's just natural mentality. One
Wow.
person understands jeopardy, the other person doesn't. So those are the things that you want to sort of capitalize on when you see these shifts occurring.
Wow. I mean, it sounds very brutal in a way, doesn't it? We are talking about people's lives after all, but then again, business is business, and economics have to work, don't they, for businesses to run efficiently? But it still feels a bit brutal. What do you think?
I think business always has this. My one of my professors used to say business is blood sport. We used to watch
Mm.
the Jean Claude Van Damme film. Business is blood sport, and it's an unfortunate uh, It's an unfortunate arena that we live in. The sad
Mm.
truth, though, is that big businesses employ a lot of people.
Yep.
So there is that reality that when you're a company of 10 staff, being able to cut two staff members when it's tough might make you the business big enough to employ another 50 when the time comes.
Mm.
You want to see your place in our society in the overall tapestry of what it is. So if you stay a business of 10 people and you keep them, you'll keep those 10 people happy. But is that the better thing for society? The better thing for society might be to sacrifice the two for today so you can be a business big enough to hire back 20 more people tomorrow, 30 more people tomorrow, 40 more people tomorrow. And I think that if we are all doing that, then there will always be businesses and companies that will be able to catch those people falling if they're strong and hard workers. Now, this is where we'll get to too much of a political discussion because the idea should be that where businesses are not able to catch those falling knives, governments might want to be in place to help people, but that becomes a larger political discussion that I don't know I'm qualified for. But I would say that ideally, we would all want to live in a society that enabled businesses to make the best decision for the company's health, for the company's longevity, and for the company's growth,
Yep.
while living in a society that protects the people that are impacted by that truth, you know? So that would
Yeah,
be perfect.
that actually makes a lot of sense because we, good people care about other people, and we realize, obviously, you're an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. We love being entrepreneurs because it gives us more freedom and flexibility to run our own businesses and not have other people dictate those decisions to us.
Yeah.
But, not everybody is made of the stuff to run their own business. People are a lot of people, they prefer to be employees, but obviously that does mean that they do have less control, doesn't it? And, as you said, it just is, well, the choose your hard, right? If you're an entrepreneur, we've got a different type of hard, right? And I guess that is just the brutal reality of being employed. It's that you are not always in control.
That's very true. I think the concept though is that when you are unemployed, I mean, you always want to speak the benefits of all sides. When you're an employee, you're reaping the benefit of group decisions,
Mhm.
right? So the idea is that if you're an employee in a group of 10, then I have to make a decision that technically helps all 10 people. So you might
Yeah.
benefit a lot of the time. Um, Unfortunately, if I make a decision that hurts 10 people, you'll be caught up in the wash, even if it wasn't specifically applied to you. But that's a benefit. You get the benefit of groupthink. If the team has done well, but you've done poorly, you'll still reap the benefit of a raise because you're being seen as a member of a team. As an entrepreneur, it's like they say the old west. It's a poncho, a cowboy hat, and a s- and, you know and a lucky horse trying to survive. So it's a bit difficult, but again, you choose your stress. You choose your stresses, and you develop your skills and your aptitudes. And I think you know companies have to. You always want to foster goodwill from your people. You always want you always want your team members to see where they fit, but you also want everybody to want to help the company grow, right? The
Y
company's not one
yeah.
person, it's its own organism. We are all sacrificing what we must so that it can live. And I
Yeah.
think that some companies don't always do that. People end up working for a manager or a supervisor or the owner. But we want to have a strong enough company culture that we're all here for the badge. That's what at least that's the saying that we use here at the Drag Group. We all work for the crest, even me.
Yeah, and I really, really like that. I think it's very, very clear, and I think a lot of it makes a lot of sense, comparing and contrasting the 2, because you have to be a team person, really, don't you? If you're employed, that's all part of it, isn't it?
Yeah,
You can't really be that lone wolf in the same way, can you? Just doesn't
correct.
work.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Amazing. So let's get back to this topic of cash flow, Trivelle. So
Yeah,
this is your expertise. So cash flow, cash in the bank,
yeah,
that's something that all businesses need in order to operate and to scale and to be successful.
yeah,
Obviously, unless you are a tech company like Uber or something, and you're being bankrolled by investor cash for the long term, that's a different business model. But
yep,
most businesses need cash flow, right?
Yep.
So let's just talk about this. This is your real core expertise, isn't it? Um, how do they create consistent cash flow, and how can businesses use these trends and analysis and data and so on to make sure they don't run out of cash?
Absolutely. I think it's interesting that you use Uber, because even Uber understands cash flow, which is why they got into the Uber Eats business, right? Something that's
Mm.
cyclical and rotational, where they're bringing on other companies. I
Ah,
think the goal for cash flow that people always want to look at, people when they think cash flow, they think generating enough cash to have a profit at the end. They usually like to retain those earnings. Sometimes that's not what cash flow is there. Sometimes cash flow is really only there to mitigate your expenses while you wait for your home run to hit. And I'll explain that
ah,
concept. It really just does come from knowing your balance sheet. So working once at a tech startup, our goal was to create an app that could let people make long-term investments into real estate. That was the
mhm.
overall play. And we knew that that would be what was draining up the investor capital, building the systems, bringing on the members. That's the large scale play. That's what's going to drive the company into the future. But the return on something like that's going to take a year, 2 years, 3 years. And a
Mhm.
business can't run that way. So we spent a lot of time working on different cash flow ideas. The real unlocking of it was our marketing manager comes in and he says, "What are our expenses?" So we said, "Well, we got to do this for the service. We have to do this. We got to do that." We broke down that number. And he says, "We need an idea that generates that much money, because all we have to do is make sure our expenses don't get us underwater. The cash flow will then take care of itself." So, what is the number one thing that every business should look at, no matter what field that they're in, no matter what source that they're in? How is your cash flow solution in comparison to your debt solution? What is your revenue? What is your revenue requirements? If you're turning $10,000 a month in cash flow, but you're burning $30,000 a month in expenses, you have a problem. It is
Mm.
important for you to look at that problem. Sometimes companies don't look at it, especially when they receive investment, because they're able to use the investor capital to skirt that issue. But I
Yeah.
always say that your cash flow solution, as well as your cash burn solution, should be sort of neck and neck, and that's the sign of a healthy business. The third thing, don't be scared to invest, or sorry, the second thing, don't be scared to invest in cash flow. Sometimes companies will receive seed investment or any form of investment, and they're putting it into building an infrastructure towards what they want. And they
Uh-huh.
don't want to use that extra investment to go perhaps just adjacent or just askew for something that could produce regular cash flow. And I think that that's a problem.
Oh,
You
yeah.
always want to have a portion of any capital, any money in your company to be reinvested to the consistent generation of new capital for the company, even if you start small. It's just always, always, always important to know that investment towards cash flow is necessary. Too often, businesses operate themselves into a bad financial position. And I think that that's because they had no focus on what it would take to generate cash flow in that industry.
Yeah, this is such a fascinating discussion, Trivelle, and I love that concept of investing for cash flow, right? Because cash is king and so on. I'm just wondering whether you've read that book called Profit First.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you've read that book. So
I
what do you
did.
think about that book?
So, okay. The thing is, I love it. I worry sometimes that some of the strategies and concepts that we give to entrepreneurs, or books that we encourage them to read, don't cover the wide variety of industries that exist today.
Yep.
And that's my only thing. I do think profit first. I love the concepts, but I do think that not every industry is built the same. I also don't
Mhm.
think that profit in every industry looks the same. There
Yep.
is a value perhaps sometimes to social capital that we don't consider. In our modern world, there is a value. This is a cash flow thing that people don't consider. There is a value in you being able to call in a favor that you would otherwise have to pay for. And you got to be willing to put that on your balance sheet, right? So for example, if you're running your beautiful podcast, you have your sign, you have your set up, all of that is revenue. But if those are things that were able to be provided because of a barter system or because of a relationship, you want to put them on the ledger because they hold value. It'll give you even a different perspective of how much cash flow your company's actually driven.
That's powerful. That is really, really interesting, and I love that. Have you got any more tips like that? Because that's an amazing insight. Yeah, fantastic.
So I think the 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 additional step that anybody would want to have, and I say it all the time, but the goal when people start a company or a business or a department is not to make money. It's to gain favor,
Mhm.
because favor is infinite, money's finite. The more favors you can call in, the more you're benefiting your company, and that will drive your cash flow. It's all about favor. And I think that has been our focus. Most of the decisions that we make aren't made towards, at least in the beginning, they're not made towards how much cash it'll generate. Sometimes it's about, hey, will this person owe us if we do this right? Sometimes it's about, will we be in this person's good books if we do this right? What favor can we call in if we do this right? And I think that for young entrepreneurs or even business owners who are starting out and they're seeing their cash flow get tight, or they're seeing perhaps their operating capital shrink, the goal isn't going to be to sort of veer into that and drive new ways to get money through the door. Sometimes it'll be about doubling down and getting some favor. Because what you want, there's two ways to increase your cash flow. You either
Yeah.
drive new business or you
Mhm.
mitigate your expenses going out the door. The
Yeah.
easiest way to mitigate expenses going out the door is to double down on garnering good favor from your partners. And I think that's something that's the second tip I always think of. When people see that they're low on cash flow, they think, okay, new ideas, new initiatives, new money through the door. But there is value in how do we mitigate the number that we currently have? How do we go to some of our partners and change the bill structure of some of these things, change the pay
Mm.
structure? Because all that has impact.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, this is music to my ears because obviously my podcast is called The Smart Connector. I'm all about connection. I'm all about kind of leveraging social capital, relationships, building
Yep.
new relationships, making relationships work in every single way.
Hmm.
Because that is just so important to, not just to me, but I think to most really successful people. They do understand this concept of your network is your net worth is not just a kind of trite throwaway thing. It genuinely, the quality of your relationships is the quality of your business, and then that dictates the quality of your life. That's what I believe
Absolutely.
anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Amazing, amazing. So, Trivelle, how have you grown your business then specifically? Talk us through, where it was at the beginning, where it is now, and what were the steps that you took in order to get here today?
Yeah. So when we first started, as a trading think tank, it was really about keeping it internal. We went the route of trying to do educational programs. So we would do little courses on derivatives trading, breaking down the market, um, which was great, but it still, I don't think, was the most lucrative.
Mhm.
Where we were able to really take steps of growth is when we wanted to start to advise of our trading methods, but to larger institutions and corporations, sort of getting over that learning curve of having people understand the way we saw both the financial markets, how we wanted to drive cash flow, but also how to make tough decisions to increase value on a balance sheet. Those were the things that really helped us when we took sort of our retail strategies to the institutional space. We were able to grow. I would say that the second innovation that we loved is, again, this doubling down of investment in this sort of public media zeitgeist, the
Yeah.
content that we do. And then, truly, the investment in social media helped us grow immeasurably because it provided a gravitas and a legitimacy to the optics of the business, that I think I would take this responsibility as a leader. I think I was ignorant to for a while. For a long period of time, I thought, hey, if we do good work, word of mouth will carry the day. But we are in this new millennium where it kind of doesn't matter what you look like, right? They have this joke in American baseball. It says, the Yankees are the Yankees because people can't stop staring at the pinstripes. It matters how you look. Doesn't matter who's in the uniform, how good they are. You're still going to stare at the pinstripes. So I think that an agreement or an understanding of how things had to look optically to exist was a step that we took that we felt very strongly about. And it's never advisable in the beginning to go too political, with any opinion or any stance. But covering those stories we saw also put us into social conversations that we weren't in before. So for us, it was being willing to go places we hadn't gone before to give commentary. It was willing to maintain consistent business, right? So if we say that we'll be there, then we're there. And sort of being comfortable to do institutional partnerships. So instead of just
Mhm.
existing with retailers that we felt we can control, being humble and submitting ourselves and pitching larger companies with larger value. So maybe a retail deal we would have closed in a week, but being comfortable to close an institutional deal in a month because of its possible upside.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's really that's really what it's all about, isn't it? It's about going for the bigger fish, going for the whale clients, and actually feeling good about it, and then putting the assets and the profile in place to really give you that credibility and that gravitas.
Absolutely.
That's what it's all about, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now you've been, pretty serious about growing your Instagram following, haven't you, Trivelle? So I'd love to talk a little bit about your passion for Instagram, why Instagram. I work with a lot of consultants in my program, and a lot of them are on LinkedIn. We actually had a session today about TikTok. Obviously, there's YouTube, podcasting. There's all sorts of platforms, but I'm just interested to know why you decided to double down on Instagram.
So for so much of what we do, um, user base is important. Whether it be companies that we're investing in, um, or questions that we get from some of our partners about market activity. We felt it one of our core responsibilities to educate the general public about how we saw the world, so whether it be
Mhm.
politically or financially. The question then became, what is the audience that is following us on LinkedIn? And do they best reflect this new category of people that we're trying to reach, which is to
Mhm.
say the layman person who perhaps has felt outside of the both financial and political process and wants to now come in. We determined Instagram because of their algorithm. The filters dictate that stuff will just get thrown at you at times. And that's how we wanted our information to hit people. We
Mhm.
didn't want it to feel like it was stuck or connected to sort of a pigeonholed assumption of um, how to talk about finance, how to talk about politics. We wanted to do things differently. Thus, we wanted these things to be hitting different ears.
Yep.
And went with Instagram because we felt that that reinforced all those decisions.
Yeah, that's really interesting because as I said, in my group today, we were running a session on TikTok,
Mhm.
and, a lot of my consultants some of my consultants said, "Well, why would I want to be on a platform that's just, it's entertainment and kids dancing and all of this?" But, TikTok is heading towards being one of the biggest search engines on the planet,
Mhm.
and that, short form video content, of course, that's also very important on Instagram. It's really, impactful, isn't it?
I think so, and I think that they got it right. I mean, here in North America, I remember a company called Vine. I think it was global, and Vine didn't last that long. The thing that TikTok has gotten well, and the thing that Instagram does well, is that they'll catch you with one short clip, but then good luck putting the phone down. It is a relenting consistency of content that is just available, and it's usually in the similar format that you were just watching it in. So you don't even register that what you were watching has ended and something new has begun.
Yeah.
I think it's those slight technological adjustments you don't realize kind of keep you on the site longer than you would be or lock you into the screen, right? It's always I've seen it before where it's kind of you're going through a system and you look up and it's a lot darker and you think, man, I didn't even recognize that the screen has changed. I was just absorbing new information.
Yeah, which is powerful, right?
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah. So, Trivelle, what is your, goal for the business going forward? So you've obviously done incredibly well, which is fantastic, but, you're acquiring businesses as well and investing in businesses, aren't you? So,
Mhm.
tell us about that and why you're doing that.
I think if we're talking about investment, from an investment perspective, I have a real interest in cybersecurity. I think
Uh-huh.
that that will be the next step. I think that governments are naturally going to want to take more and more of their process safe and secure. And I think that cybersecurity funds and firms are going to be in a place to provide the security in order to do that. So government contracts will be in place for them. So I'm looking for a lot of companies in that vertical to I think, be a part of this sort of next boom. And what was the next question? I'm sorry. I think I lost that first one.
Yeah. So, well, why are you investing in companies and are you acquiring companies? And if so, why? And where is all this taking you? Obviously, there's a financial investment and using data and trends and your powers of analysis, understanding markets, and so on to make those decisions. But why was the question.
Yep. Yeah. So the goal is, so to your first question, um, of why we want to find the next unicorn. I think any investor has ego, and you always want to be a part of that next rock star company. So we're
Yes.
making these wide investments to hope that we pick the right horse one day, and would love the challenge of being part of a team that was working with a business that was on everyone's mouths and lips. That'd be a major goal.
Yeah, and why not? That would be amazing, wouldn't it? Imagine if you had been one of the first investors in Facebook or, yeah, Uber or
Mhm.
any of those other big, well, unicorn companies. That would have been amazing, wouldn't it? Yeah,
Fantastic. It
yeah.
would have been fantastic.
Yeah. So Trivelle, you're in Canada right now. So are you planning to expand internationally or are you just planning to stay? You're in Toronto, right?
Yes. In Toronto, always working with global partners, always looking to expand. But I do
Yeah.
think that it's important that you leave a footprint where you are first.
Mhm.
But we're always coming up against it here. I mean, there's 40 million people, if or just under 50 million people here in this country. Scaling requires people, so it also requires marketing. So we're always, I would say that we're always not leaving, but we're always looking at opportunities elsewhere to expand our footprint. I don't know that there's an area that we're necessarily scared of if it's a place that we could find, study, and understand.
Amazing. Well, Trivelle, it has been such a pleasure to speak to you tonight. Well, it's tonight over here. It's the middle of the afternoon where you are.
Yep.
So, before we go, what is the best way for our viewers and listeners to get hold of you if they wanted to speak to you in person?
Absolutely. So you're gonna want to go to our Instagram. It's uh, the Drive Group Inc. Uh, at Instagram. So it's at the Drive Group Inc. on Instagram. THE, then DRIVE, and then group dot Inc. On Instagram. Or you can find myself, which is Triv Simpson on Instagram as well, which is TRIVSIMPSON on Instagram. But again, we're very, very proud of what we're doing on our social media page, and drive everybody to the Drive Group Inc. Or you can check us out on our website, www.thedrivegroup.ca.
Oh, well, that's amazing. And one more thing before we go, we did say that we would talk about football, didn't we?
We did,
Because
we did.
you are a Canadian,
I am.
but you love English football, don't you?
I absolutely love it. I mean, not as much at the moment. Obviously, Arsenal unfortunately went out there. They bottled the league. I think the players lost a bit of stomach. But yeah, people would be very surprised. Massive droves of people. I think it, especially here in Toronto, because it is such an immigrants city. Massive droves of people loving world football. I mean, we have a place up here called uh, Danforth, and during the Champions League final, it will be full. And for us, because of our time zone, pubs will be open at 12 noon to play the Champions League final. People drinking beer, having a fantastic time. So, looking forward to it. Obviously, we're at the business end of the year now. City's won the title. We know that. We're just looking to see, are they going to win the treble? So they have the FA Cup that they want to make a play for. We'll see how they do in the Champions League. So it'll be a very interesting 2 weeks, and we'll be cheering here in Canada, not as loudly, but as passionately, perhaps, as we can.
Oh, that's so cool. And you actually come over to England, don't you? You love football so much that you will actually come over to England
Absolutely,
to watch an Arsenal match live, which is quite
absolutely.
incredible. Yeah.
Absolutely, got to go see the Gunners as well, and I have to love what Mikel Arteta is doing. Obviously, coming second this year is a tremendous accomplishment. Um, Back in the Champions League for the first time in ages, and let's see, let's have a go. Right, you miss all the shots you don't take. Well, it'll be interesting to see what they do in the transfer window. How much of the purse is opened up? Obviously, the Cronkies are they're a very, very rich family, so it should be in the budget. I mean, we need to compete. So you look at City with Holland setting records every year. Kevin De Bruyne, maybe the best midfielder in the history of the Prem. So definitely things need to be made. We'll make a push. Newcastle this year back in Champions League football. Manchester United with Ten Hag winning top four. Tottenham still looking for a manager. We'll see what they can sort out. Aston Villa, I think, is going to have European football if they beat Tottenham this weekend. So that will be interesting to take a look at. Aston Villa, I think it would be the first time in European football for 13 years. And then, of course, the great storyline is Jose Mourinho, who's going to go for his sixth European title if he could win the Europa League with Roma and bring them back to the Champions League after some time away. But it'll be curious because I am of the belief that if he wins the Europa League with Roma, one of the big clubs will come calling. And we all know that Jose Mourinho's box office, so I think he'll be lured away. So it'll be an interesting summer, an interesting final couple of weeks. A great time to be a football fan for sure.
Yeah, and I've just identified another strand of activity. If you feel like taking on another career in addition to your business, I think you would make an amazing sports commentator, football commentator. Yep, I would definitely. Well, I mean, you are right up there with all the best of them. So I think that's got to be on the list, on your bucket list,
We'll
Trivelle.
try one
Yeah,
day. One day,
one
the
day.
goal would be, of course.
Exactly. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Well, okay, so it has been a wonderful interview. Really have enjoyed speaking to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to head over to Instagram straight away and follow you, as I hope our viewers and listeners will as well. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, Angela.